Okay, good morning. I'm actually in the process of debating this with myself. This might be my favorite time of year. As a child, summer was clearly my favorite time of the year. Once June hit, out of school, I loved it. And I hated fall because I went back to school in the fall. But there's something about the fall now that it's heaven to me. So beautiful. It feels like June right now in November up here in Massachusetts, and I'm loving it. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about. I wanna make an introduction here. I have a guest today who I've known for, it's got to be close to maybe even more than 20 years. He's a longtime friend. He's a former colleague, perhaps one of the funniest people I know. We're going to leave most of that off the recording today because I think we'll both be out of work if for some reason we go down that path. But anyway, he's a business broker. He's the founder of a company called Time's Up, based out of Franklin, Massachusetts. And Time's Up helps their clients sell an impressive array of companies that nobody's ever heard of. Those are his words, not my words. So Chris Bond, thanks for being with me today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Awesome. All right, Chris, we're going to be talking about something that's relatively heavy today. You know it, I know it. It's about a health scare that you experienced years ago. Before we jump into that, I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about Time's Up, what you do, maybe a little bit more color around it so those that are listening kind of get a feel for why they might want to give you a call.
Yeah, appreciate that. So we do two basic things, help folks value and sell small companies. And they tend to be either industrial or construction related companies. So they're making something, they're distributing something, they're installing something, they're in the trades. So it's a lot of mom and pops, grandma and grandpops. The fact that nobody's ever heard of them is kind of a fun way of communicating that I have only worked with small companies and will continue to only work with small companies, real salt of the earth folks.
And when we first met, I mean, you and I know each other because of the sales training world. And around the time when we became colleagues is when you were contemplating this whole idea of going out on your own and venturing into this world. So now it's been what? It's close to what, 12 years?
It's
Just past 12 years. What's your take for anybody that might be going through this process as a business owner in the spaces that you're interested in? What are some of the things that they typically don't think about that they should be? I'm curious to get your take on that.
Yeah. Planning is key. So I have unfortunately had the occasion to work on many projects where little or no planning was done on behalf of widows or people in hospital beds or people, battling a disease they didn't anticipate getting. These are tough situations because invariably you're going to be selling the business at a discount under duress. Not ideal. What folks should be thinking about if they ever plan on selling a small business, and by the way, the premise here is every small business has value to someone somewhere at some point. Every single one of them has value. The question is finding that value and discovering to whom it has value at a particular time. But folks that are ever considering selling a small business should think in terms of looking 3 to 5 years down the road, always anticipating where they want to be 3 to 5 years down the road and where the business should be today and 3 to 5 years down the road.
Why is it that you think that they would call somebody like you too late? Is it just not a thought in their mind?
Yeah, it's the same reason we don't do a good job as a society of battling climate change. It's a can you can kick down the road. I read the other day that it's at least 50 years that the warning bells have been sounding about the climate changing, and here we are. And business owners are no different. It's easy to think of yourself as immortal and to think I can deal with that tomorrow or in 5 years. There's a woman you and I both know, Beth Davis. I'll never forget the time that Beth said to me when she was running CEO roundtables some years ago. She would ask a business owner when they wanted to be done. When do you want to sell the business? When do you want to be out? And the answer was almost always 5 years. And invariably, because she built long-term relationships, she would ask the same question of the same individual 5 years later, and the answer was the same. 5 years. It's always 5 years, right? Because it's far enough away where I don't have to do anything today or this week, but it's close enough where it's kind of exciting.
Well, I mean, this probably is a great segue into your personal story. And like I said, I've known you for, I think it was maybe 98, 99. I can't remember the first time we met, but you were young in your career. I was young in my career. And then a number of years later, all of a sudden I'll let you kind of tell the story, but at a routine annual checkup, you were awakened pretty quickly. So you want to just kind of first of all, walk me through what your mindset was around the annual checkup, and how old were you, and when did it happen? So
I just turned 40, 13, 14 years ago. And I had this wonderful doctor. He's since retired. We were born on the same day, interestingly, probably 40 years apart. Wonderful gentleman, Dr. Mohammed Siddiqui, wanted to know if I, had ever had an EKG. And I said, no. I mean, look at me. I'm the picture of health. Why would me at 40 need an EKG? He said, well, because you're 40, we probably should do one. And so they did. And 5 minutes later, he's got these concerns. So I went from, this is a hassle, I thought I'd be out of here by now, I love you, doc, but like, really? To, everything kind of stopped.
Right.
And the long story short, the two things that I think people find the most alarming, and why I'm such a believer in letting doctors poke and prod and be proactive in their search for problems, it was twofold. One, 6 months of tests later, it was discovered that I had a major heart issue. And this is part B, or number two, is it had nothing to do with what he found on the initial EKG. So I went to a physical at the age of 40, was annoyed and bothered to even having to be there, to getting a proactive examination of my heart that 6 months later revealed that I had two different heart issues without a symptom.
Now, was there part of you that didn't believe it?
No. I believe everything out of this guy's mouth, frankly. That's why I went from, this is kind of a hassle, I should be on my way. Now, bear in mind, this is back in the day, so this is you'll appreciate this. So this is pre-smartphone era, right? I don't even know, do we have what were those pads with the cover we used to have?
Palm Pilots or something?
Palm Pilots! We probably had Palm Pilots back in 2008. So I used to jam my calendar full for fear of any wasted time, right? I didn't want to be the guy sitting in a parking lot for 20 minutes outside the next appointment. I wanted everything to be, so I put myself under a ton of stress back then, maximize the calendar. To me, for all the sins of the smartphone, and let's not get started on that, the greatest gift of the smartphone is you may as well loosen up your schedule, because you could be sitting in your car doing work.
Yeah.
So I was kind of off put by the good doctor. But as soon as he said, this isn't, something's a little off here, he had my rapt attention.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've never had that experience. I have been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and I've spoken openly about it in the past. And I've got high cholesterol, and I've spoken about that in the past. And when I remember each of those appointments distinctly, and I viewed the discovery, or whatever you want to call it, as a pure inconvenience. I didn't buy it. I had the opposite reaction, where I thought, there's no way I have sleep apnea. There's no way I have high cholesterol. I am thin. I exercise. I am a picture of health. I actually believed those things. And I didn't do anything to address either of those things for several years. And then when I finally did address those things, my life has changed dramatically. Now, in your case, you believed it right away. It's crazy, though, that it took 6 months. What he was concerned about was not actually what happened. So what exactly happened?
That might have been the issue. What he initially found, which is called a left bundle branch block. I've learned a few terms over the years. It's an electrical charge that I believe diagonally crosses the heart. That might have been something that sent he and other doctors down the wrong alleyways. If not for that, there probably would have been a shorter path to finding the real issue. But then again, nobody's looking for the real issue if not for that minor issue that was discovered. So I'm sure that was part of the 6-month issue of figuring out exactly what was going on and why the data wasn't quite adding up, and what is it about this guy with this simple left bundle branch block that also seems to have another issue. And that was over those 6 months. That was test after test after test after test.
Yeah, but Chris, you were symptomless. You've told me this before.
Right.
Symptomless. So even after they said, hey, something's up here, you felt totally the same. There was nothing about your life that felt different. Your body.
No, not that I can recall. It was. I'm sure there were. If I could go back, what would Q shares? If we could turn back time.
Great song.
Right?
Isn't that on your
Timeless.
playlist? That's on your playlist, right?
Yeah, of course. Like Cher herself. It's a timeless song. So if I could turn back time, maybe there was a shortness of breath, or maybe there was something there that I simply didn't pick up on. And maybe also over those 6 months of tests, and that includes, the stress test, yep, the catheterization, MRIs, multiple MRIs, this long search for exactly what was going on inside me. I'm sure there were other, signals that maybe I picked up on and maybe I didn't. I actually think, if I recall correctly, because I do remember exactly the company you and I used to work at, I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when the punchline was delivered, which was, you need to have major surgery for a birth defect. I'm sure there were moments where I was, bothered, but I think I recall burying myself in work at that time.
Prior or after you got the news?
Prior. Those 6 months of, geez, I wonder what's going on. Yeah. I think to your question of, boy, you didn't feel any different. No, I think I just, yeah. So my kids at that time would have been 17, 12, and 10. So I was all about, yep, working on behalf of the family, like we were trying to save for college, and, the kids with all their activities. And it was probably pretty easy work. It was probably pretty easy to just keep really busy for 6 months.
And was there part of you that was just kind of banking on, they're not going to find much, I'll be fine? Or were you expecting a call like that?
By the end, I was expecting, not only was I expecting the call saying, get ready for major surgery, I was, believe it or not, relieved to get that news. It was better to get the really bad news and the scary diagnosis and prognosis and path forward than to go another month or 2 or 3 or 6 of, geez, you're an oddball. We haven't really seen this before. In fact, my cardiologist to this day, the day she called me to say you need surgery, was also the day that she said, and this is where I release you. This is where you go from Framingham into Boston. And I said, I don't think so, because I adore this woman. Yeah. Wonderful doctor, implicit trust. Mm-hmm. I'll do anything that she prescribes. And she said, yeah, your situation is out of my league. I wouldn't even, this isn't what I handle.
Wow. And did you have a sense of what the surgery would entail? Or did you now it was time for you to find out?
That was time for me to find out. And little did I know that my bride and her mom, a lifelong career RN, had already figured it all out and were wondering how I was going to handle the news, and they didn't tell me. Wow. So when I went in for the pre-surgery consultation, this is where they talk about depression, everything that can go wrong. I was ashen. I was sick. And my wife was stoic. Now, she's a stoic Irish girl, so it wasn't that surprising. But she was just like, yep, this is all making sense to me. And, walking out of that surgeon's office, boy, it's almost like you knew. And she did, because her mom knew.
How did they keep it together? I know that's probably more of a question for her and your mother-in-law, but how did they... I don't know that I could have kept it together. I think you would have read it on my face. Could you tell that they knew something or thought something?
No. Wow. I'm way too self-centered for that, Dave. I think you know that.
That's true. That's a stupid question. Strike that from the record. Um, okay, but let's just talk about without getting into the gory details. I think we need to share a few of them. But what was the surgery? Something, by the way, 6 months ago, you're inconvenienced by a checkup.
I have
And
an
now,
appointment. Very important.
yeah. You got to pick up your sub at D'Angelo's, and you got to go here. But then all of a sudden, now you're on an operating table. But this is not a minor surgery at all.
Right, major open heart surgery. They shut you down. They shut down the system, as we like to say, and put you on the heart and lung machine. And so I guess, old drama aside, I guess technically you're dead at that time. I don't know if that's really true. I mean, they do this stuff all the time. So it was for something called ACA. Interestingly, that ACA, the Affordable Care Act, became a common, commonly known acronym around the same time, or at least going forward, right? Obamacare.
Yep.
But ACA, when it relates to the heart, is anomalous coronary artery. It means that one of your four coronary arteries is out of place. And in my case, you're supposed to be 2 and 2, and I was 2 and 2. Wow. Or 2 and 2. So one of mine was just completely on the opposite side of where it should have been, and abnormally long, traveling between the aorta and pulmonary arteries. Wow. So these are the things that I learned. So I was 40 and relatively healthy. So it's not that. They even told me if you were 80, we wouldn't even bother. But I also learned it's what killed somebody you'll know, Pistol Pete Maravich.
Yeah.
He died of what I had and he was playing pickup basketball, but he was also unhealthy. I think is maybe an important detail. I think I was relatively healthy at that time. Definitely heavier than I am now. Definitely had worse habits than I have now. Yeah. But I think relatively speaking, I was healthy. But having a support system, having my wife who was on top of every detail, her mom in the background, and this wonderful, just an amazing set of doctors. Right. I couldn't have been in better hands. And the funny thing was, so it was June 25th, 2008, when I had the surgery, and we had to leave at dawn. I'll never forget that. Walking out the door at dawn, my in-laws taking care of our kid, the 2 younger kids anyways, they were there to care for them because I'd be gone for a few days. And my wife would be by my side. We get in the car and we're driving from Franklin to Boston, and we were wondering, you know what? Dr. Sarkar, what is he doing right now? What is he eating his Cheerios and reading the sports section? What's he doing the crossword? Does he know I'm coming in? Like, does he give a little extra? Is he a little extra on edge? Is he a little extra focused today? Probably not.
I hope not. I hope not.
Well, true. Exactly. For him, it was a Wednesday.
Yeah. And you had to believe that. You had to trust and believe that, I'm sure, in order to calm your own mind, right?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Yeah. It was a big deal.
What was going through? I mean, Chris, they cut you open. So they had to what, crack open your sternum? Is that what they do?
Yep.
And then they go in and whatever, reposition all the...
They do. They shut down your heart, and then they cut the artery that's in the wrong place, shorten it, and put it in the right place. At least I don't know if all ACA is the same. I just knew about mine, which was that long boy that's out of place. We're going to shorten that fella and put him where he belongs.
Okay. And then they stitch you back up. You said you'd be home in a couple of days. Is that actually what happened? You were only there a few days?
A few days. That was so quick story. So I have a late brother-in-law who was a therapist. May he rest in peace. He's been gone about 8 years now. He was a therapist, and when he heard of the surgery I needed to go through, he took me through a process that had me full on crying. I was by myself in a dark basement with a landline on my chest on speakerphone. So he could, from New York City, he could walk me through an exercise for about an hour that had me going to some really strange places in my mind. I was a tree. I was deeply rooted. I was conjuring all these images with his guidance, and I was bawling.
Wait, before or after?
Before surgery.
And what was he doing? Trying to prep your mind for for what you were about to encounter?
Exactly. Because what they said, they booked your room for 5 to 7 days, but he said he could coach my mind or coach my body into a shorter stay.
Wow.
And so I went through that and was deeply affected. He had me thinking about old friends and relationships that I had lost track of and all this stuff that would be healthy, I guess, for the separation of white and red blood cells, and it clears a path for quicker healing. I don't know. I didn't care.
Right.
What was beautiful was I had this family member and expert who was willing to help me in such a meaningful way. So I go in for surgery and I am way out of it for a day. But I'm in the ICU, and then I get wheeled into a room that has been reserved for me for 4, 5, 6 nights, 6 nights anyways. I think they block a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I get wheeled in, and there's my roommate. Oh, great. There's my roommate, who I would soon find out watched like 2.5 Men on volume 11.
Oh, I know this person. I already know this person.
Oh,
it's the worst. It's the worst.
Yeah, it was not good. So I get wheeled in, but hey, we're going to be living together for we might be together for a week for all I know. Yeah. So, hi, I'm Chris. And he says, hi, I'm leaving.
Oh, really?
So the only words this man spoke to me were, hi, I'm leaving. I checked out 3 days later. He was still there. Talk about denial. So the denial that you were referencing, I think before, like, what are you talking about? You're clearly wrong. I clearly know my own body.
Yep.
He was overweight and he had heart surgery. That's the wing we were in. And because of my brother-in-law's counseling, I believe, heart of hearts, pun not intended, that put me on a path to a quicker exit from the hospital. And my grouchy roommate cranking bad sitcoms, all hours of the day, where I had the right attitude and the right counseling to be on a good path. He probably had the opposite, and I don't know what became of him.
Yeah, when you said that, it reminded me of the dad on Everybody Loves Raymond or whatever. That's the first person I thought of when you made that comment.
Peter Boyle.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that guy.
Exactly. I called, I don't know when I called you, a month ago, and I said, hey, you open to talking about this? And you said, absolutely, let's do it. I know you professionally, but I also know you on a personal, you and I have exchanged some of the wildest text strings, which, by the way, shall remain invisible to the world. But over the years, so some of the funniest texts, and I wonder like how much your sense of humor also played a role in helping you kind of work through this mentally.
A good question, because I do remember. So I had my doctor who first discovered the first issue that was not related to my surgery. He said, how many months are you taking off? I said, months? What? This is the summer of 2008. I'm going to be sitting around for July, August, September, October. I don't think so. So I very stubbornly committed to being back to work within a month, which he advised against.
Wow.
He advised against. No, it's totally fair. He said, well, first of all, you can't lift anything. You can't lift a gallon of milk. You can't be doing anything strenuous. So over 3 weeks, I read 8 books and watched the entire 5-season run of The Wire. And so it was like lockdown for 3 weeks. And all I read, I did puzzles, watched The Wire with my wife, start to finish, ignored the kids badly during that run.
Yep.
I gained 8 pounds. I remember I ate a lot of ice cream and the kids spoiled me. That was a lot. Like, that's just, you start feeling like a slug. So I don't know that it was a lot of humor. I remember being let out of the house with my safety pillow. I'd have to sit at Little League games on a special chair with a hood on it, with little housing. Yeah. My heart fell out like I was, 40 going on 100. But those were little treats.
Yeah.
During recovery. So I don't know. I don't know that there was humor as much as just I borrowed into stuff to do.
So I'm trying to put myself in that situation, and I know how I get when I don't feel well, which is rare. Knock on wood. But I retreat to being alone. I'm not comfortable with anyone helping me. I just go into like a cocoon, unfortunately, when I don't feel well. I don't know what it is, whether I don't want the attention or I don't want to be perceived as sick or whatever that is. And I mean, at 40 years old, you know, young dad, young kids, young wife, active, you played basketball, I think you still do.
Played yesterday. Yep.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden you can't do those things and you're stuck under this damn chair with a pillow. Like, what was going through your head? Like, not only your head, what were your kids thinking? Were they, how did they handle this? I'm asking you 1,000 questions at once, but like,
Yeah.
how were you processing that? How were they processing their dad? Did they communicate with you any differently? Did you feel different like around them? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, they were nervous around me. They were adorable. They wanted to spoil me. They made me collages. They visited me in the hospital. My middle one couldn't even look because you could see the bright red scar. If I
Yeah.
wasn't careful, cinching up, you could see that. And she could, at 12 years old, bless her, you couldn't even say blood or vein. She had no tolerance for that kind of stuff at all. So I remember her averting her eyes like wild when they came to the hospital. But some of the best advice I got, you're reminding me, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but my brother-in-law said, well, how are you addressing the oldest, the 17-year-old, as opposed to the other two who were 12 and 10? I said, what are you talking about? They're just all my kids. He says, no, she's a virtual adult or a practical adult, and they're little children. And if you think you can talk to them the same way
Yeah.
about this, you're wrong. And he was right. And so I was more direct with my oldest,
Yeah.
and more soft shoe with the younger two. But they were amazing. You feel pretty lucky when, if everybody, even if everybody's acting, kind of walking around eggshells around you, that probably means they care
Oh
that
yeah.
you get through the other end.
Oh yeah. 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 Were you self-conscious at all?
About
Being fragile. You don't I've known you a long time. You're really an out there guy. You project very confidently. Here I am, always upbeat, healthy, energy, etc., funny. And all of a sudden you're hurt. You're injured, or however you want to put it. That's not what people are used to seeing.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that I felt particularly self-conscious or vulnerable. I probably felt a little sorry for myself, right? Because I was going stir crazy. And listen, there were I watched maybe the best television show of all time. I read the 600-page autobiography or biography of Joe Strummer, one of the co-founders of the Clash. I mean,
Hmm.
I read 2,000-page Ken Follett novels. So there was an upside too, right? Here's a bowl of ice cream and a great book. Oh my goodness, you're also reminding me, wow, the stuff you don't think about much anymore.
Hmm.
Watching my kids do the weekly weeding, because that's something I do. I weed the beds. To this day, I will walk my property and pull weeds.
I do the same thing.
And I'll be damned if I'm going to miss a weekly appointment. And if I have surgery, somebody's pulling those weeds. So I remember sitting in my yard instructing the two younger kids on the proper way to pull a weed.
Where I want to focus now is just how you started to get reacclimated into a sense of normalcy. That's one area that I want to cover, but the other is, and maybe I'll just ask this first. I think about, veterans, for example. I'll try to tie this into veterans, coming back from, whatever, Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever they've come, Vietnam, and having to reacclimate to regular life with people that have never experienced, say, what they experienced. And I think every once in a while, like being a veteran who, may have witnessed a car bomb or may have lost a friend or a unit or whatever, come back and you're standing at line in Dunkin' Donuts and somebody's got the audacity to bitch about my coffee's taking too long. And what goes on in the mind of somebody who's experienced like true loss, true tragedy, true pain, and to see somebody with such a little problem exacerbating it, and how that must just drive them insane. And I don't know whether, I'm just curious, like all of a sudden you're living a normal life. You're doing the right thing, as a dad, as a husband, as a professional. And then all of a sudden, nothing's guaranteed to you anymore. And you got to go out into the world. Do you have it? I'm all over the place because that's my nature, Chris. But do you view people differently now, having almost lost everything?
I do. It's funny. 2 nights ago, we had the joy of having all our kids home, which doesn't happen. It didn't happen hardly at all during COVID, but it doesn't happen often enough. And my wife made 2 different soups, which were amazing. We were doing a puzzle, which not everybody was excited about.
Right.
We were having this big, long visit around the dining room table, and the topics of the Real Housewives and the Bachelor slash Bachelorette
It's
came
killing me.
up. And oh my goodness. And my kids know, I used to know, no judgment. I mean, obviously, there are ways to just kill time and ways to turn your brain off. I have my own, of course. I watched a lot of football yesterday.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, but so back in the day when like The Bachelor in Paradise, when my kids were in high school, we were the house where you could have a ton of kids over and it would be hysterical, like packing the family room with high schoolers who could barely hear a word coming off the screen because there's so much commentary going on and tweeting, and I love that kind of stuff. And then it dawned on me one day, what is actually happening right now? What this reality television is just a horrendous blight on society. It's terrible. And you know me well enough to know when I decide something is over, it's over. It's a switch. It gets turned off, and I move on. So my kids, they like to have their own brain turning off time, and I'm excited that they have this ridiculous thing that they like to compare notes on, but they also know that it's a little bit of not a dicey topic around me, but it's not something I'm going to participate in. And they said, come on, loosen up. And I said, this is just 2 nights ago. And I said, I'm not sure what it is. It could be a major health scare, a parent dying, or your best friend dying out of nowhere, tragically. Yeah. But at some point you decide there isn't enough time for me to waste away doing something like watching The Bachelor. And I hit that place. I think I hit it at 50, kind of independent of these other things that happen. But when life deals you these blows, I think all cliches aside, you start to really analyze where you're spending your time. And that's also why I made a major career shift not long after the surgery. It's when I sat around for a few weeks and then eased back, for a few hours of work. So call it a month of just being home in the summer, not being able to do much. It really had me considering, well, if I'm not completely thrilled with what I'm doing, or if I feel like I'm not challenging myself enough, if it's been a long time since I really went out on a limb and challenged myself, yeah, that's a mistake. And that's what led to getting into business brokerage and doing the valuation and sale of these small companies. Because while you and I were doing terrific work, I thought I enjoyed that work where you're helping a business owner grow sales. Somewhere along the line, it dawned on me, well, the bigger issue would be that you're growing profitable sales, that those profitable sales are increasing or developing meaningful earnings, and that a profitable small business can and should be sold to a third party. And that's what led me down that road. So I owe Dr. Muhammad Siddiqui a lot for his proactive nature all those years ago, rooting around inside me, looking for a problem that neither one of us had any reason to believe existed.
Is there anything that you used to, what did you learn about yourself in terms of, were there things that you took for granted, like your own mortality or everyday life things that, wow, and the reason I say that, you referenced, loss of a parent, loss of your best friend. I know you told me about that recently, and obviously your own experience. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unexperience what you've experienced. I used when my wife and I moved away for the first, I had lived away prior, other than college, she hadn't lived away. And when we moved down south, I had already moved down there once and then came back and then moved down there again. I said, the thing for me is leaving this area and then coming back, I always felt different. And I always felt like I was coming back to the same. Everybody's still the same. Everybody still talks about the same things, goes to the same places. And I felt different, and not in a better way or a worse way. I just felt different and I couldn't relate to the same anymore. And I wonder if you had any of those thoughts or feelings having gone through what you went through, whether it's your own experience or the loss of a friend or a parent, where you're just no longer the same guy in the conversation because you can't unknow and unexperience what you went through.
Yeah, the curse of knowledge. It's hard to recall when you didn't know something. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I've always appreciated this concept of you can't. It's hard to go back and see things from a time and a point of view before you knew something. And without a doubt, this whole experience informed that for me that you should not die with a lot of regrets, if any regrets. And so I got the counseling. They warned you, you couldn't slip into depression. Things can go wrong, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got me thinking, like, wow, what if that's all the time that I had? Used to be a time when 40 years was you were a ripe old age, right? You were the town elder. But what if that's all I got? Would I have regrets? And that's an easy short answer. Of course.
Is that the reason you named the company Time's Up?
No, so funny. So I'm in my office here, and my bank is just down the block. And 12 years ago, forming this little outfit, of course, I needed a company bank account. And of course, they're not going to give you one without a company name. So I sat outside the bank. No, it was time for my meeting, and I still didn't have a name. And I said out loud, "Come on, you need a name. Time's Up." And that became the name, Time's Up LLC.
That's crazy. When I first started this, I had 3 companies cut checks to me based on a company name that wasn't officially registered yet. And I told them that. I'm like, I'm literally making this up. I named it after the kids. I haven't filed anything with the state. I can't cash nothing. I can't cash anything yet. So it was just so crazy. It was just like a last minute type of thing. So similar in that regard. I'll let you have the last word, Chris. Just generally speaking, you said a lot of compelling things. Like, the reality is we only have so much time here. Don't live with any regret. I mean, that's what sticks with me. I think about that stuff all the time, but you're not a preacher. You never tell people what to do, but I think that there's got to be some level of advice around taking this annual checkup, maybe more seriously than we all might. And then any thoughts on how people might want to reach you if they want to have a business discussion. So I'll let you kind of take us home.
Okay, terrific. Thanks again for the opportunity, and it's great to be with you. So one thing that kind of runs right up me is when people say, I don't really want to know what they're going to find. I think that's utter madness. I think we should all treat the time that we have as precious and proactively hope for doctors to find something to fix. It's there anyways. We may as well have them finding it.
Yeah.
So that was a recent situation where a family member, way past the age of 50, didn't want to have their first colonoscopy. And I just thought that was absolute insanity. It does not even register. So short of preaching, to me, anybody who's on the verge of saying, I kind of want to put it off because I'm kind of nervous about what's going to be found, I just think that's disturbing.
Yep.
So, yep. I said stopping just short of judgmental, and that was super judgmental.
That's all right. I'm right with you.
As far as business opportunities, as I hope I made clear, I really enjoy assisting a small business owner. Typically, it's a retiree, somebody that's thinking, okay, I got to be done here at some point. Everybody can kind of tell I'm now in my 60s or even 70s, it might make sense to kind of get that ball rolling. So people can find me at timesupllc.com. All contact information is there. There's hopefully people will find some helpful information, write-ups on the thought process, frequently asked questions, people that are considering somebody to assist in the valuation and sale of the business. They can find a lot on timesupllc.com.
Chris Blunt, thank you very much, my friend.
Dave, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
You got it.